Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Insight webinar, Barriers to Delivering the Ultimate Customer Experience. My name is Jasmine Keys, and I lead the Customer Service and Experience chapter of the Insight Group. It's so exciting to have such a passionate group of customer support, experience, and contact center leaders joining the webinar today. And a special shout out to those who are registered for the Customer Service Summit next month. There's been so much sharing on social media and with peers, so thank you for helping build this community with us. Today we are discussing the crucial transition from just a cost center to customer-centric strategy driver. Specifically, what strategies are helping teams deliver the ultimate customer experience and what misjudgments are leading to unhappy customers. We'll be focusing on the webinar around the two key discussions at the 9th Annual Customer Service Summit in New York on October 23rd and 24th. Track 1, Internal Customer-Centric Team Strategy. How can we evolve internal structures, optimize our workforce, and close the feedback loop to meet new customer demands? And Track 2, External Customer-Facing Strategy. How can we thrive in the age of exceptional experiences and develop an innovative 2020 strategy to surpass our competition? This webinar will reference speakers, presentations, and panel discussions from the meeting. It's an audio-only webinar so that listeners can view the agenda and follow references throughout. I know most of you have downloaded the brochure, which is great. However, we've had a few updates since, so in order to access the most up-to-date agenda, I've just sent a link to the website so that you can follow the discussion visually as well. We'll be taking questions throughout, so please ask them through the chat function as soon as they come to mind. To set the scene for the webinar and start the discussion, we're opening a question to the audience via a poll. You should see this pop up on your screen now. So what is your main focus in 2020? Is it internal customer-centric team strategy? Is it external customer-facing strategy? Or is it the holistic strategy and trends that were covered in the keynote sessions at the Customer Service Summit? While you're answering this, I'd like to introduce 4 representatives of the 9th Annual Customer Service Summit speaker lineup who will be sharing their insight with you today. Michelle Huenink, Director of Customer Service and Support for Microsoft. Frankie Sochet, Head of Digital Care Strategy from the Home Depot. Rob Lawson, Customer Experience Partnerships at Google. And Margaret Shine, SVP Customer Experience at MasterCard. And last but certainly not least, I'd like to introduce Diane Magers, Customer Service Summit Chairperson, former CEO of CXPA, and our moderator for today's webinar. I'll pass it over to you now, Diane.
Thank you so much. We'll wait on the poll to come along. So thanks everybody for attending today. We're really excited about how we transition over to discussing what's happening at the conference. To give our listeners an understanding of your role and focus for our panelists today, I'd like for each of you to share a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your session at the meeting. Really excited to hear what you're going to speak about, and we'll obviously be riffing a little bit off of that as we talk through today. So Michelle, can you start us off? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. Thanks, Diane, and good morning, everybody. So my name is Michelle Huenink. I am a Director of Strategy and Experience in our Customer Service and Support organization at Microsoft, where we really focus on escalations, crisis, and critical situations. So my team's mission is to improve the customer experience, reduce escalations, and truly drive transformative change to improve the customer support experience. We're focused on programs, tools, insights, and analytics, and we partner across the company to improve the customer experience through a closed feedback loop, really leveraging those insights that we derive from escalations that come through. I've been in the customer experience space for over a decade and a long career of customer-centric roles and enterprise sales prior to that. So I truly am innately passionate about customers and a true customer advocate. It really runs deep in my DNA. I'll be speaking at 2 sessions at the summit in New York. Excited about that. The first will be a panel discussion, the customer experiences as the ultimate loyalty function. So we're going to be talking about implementing feedback and analytics around customer pain points that will help drive frictionless service, and then partnering across the company with key stakeholders to leverage those insights and root causes to implement changes. And truthfully, I'm still fine-tuning my main session. I'm really working out what I'll be talking about. This industry is moving so quickly that I really want to talk about what's most relevant and up to date on our strategy. At this moment, I'm really looking at, with customer experience taking over as our key differentiator, really over product and price, it's really how do we leverage our people, the power of our fans to crowdsource our customer support, empowering our employees with tools to be customer advocates and employee fans for our brand to really shift our perception out in the market as truly being seen as a customer-centric company. So that's the area I'm looking at right now. And then how do we learn from that and go drive transformation across support? So that's me in a nutshell. Thanks for having me today.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you so much. Frankie, would you share a little bit about how you and Home Depot?
Yes, thank you also for having me. Frankie Soche, I'm head of digital customer care strategy here at the Home Depot. Right now, we're really focused on making sure that we are everywhere our customers need us to be so that we can provide a frictionless experience for our customers. I know that, our customers today are really looking for that seamless experience. We want things to be easy. We're starting to expect that. So here at the Home Depot, we are really, having great leadership that's really behind us, making sure that we're there for our customers when they need us, where they need us. You don't normally think about folks needing to be able to tweet about needing a hammer, but if you look at the use case for our day-to-day customers going through stores, there's plenty of cause to use our Home Depot app that we have when you're walking through the store if you're looking for something. There's a lot of ways that we need to have this digital technology coming into the future, and the Home Depot is a great company with great leadership who is really focused on making sure that we've got that available for our customers. I will tell you one of the sessions that I'm excited about. I've been attending the Insight Group Customer Service Summit for many years now, and I've always found it to be very helpful where you're able to get really good actionable information. But one of the sessions that I'm really excited about is this new philosophy of an interactive roundtable where we'll have an opportunity for the audience to really participate and get their particular questions met. So that's something that I'm really excited about. And I think one in particular is talking about which challenges are being presented by each touch point around social messaging, crowd service and forums, self-service FAQ pages, things like that. So we're really going to get down into it so that you can have good takeaways to action on as soon as you get home.
That's wonderful. I love the how-to focus here. Everybody wants to have those takeaways because we've all been in that spot where it's like, I got stuff. What do I do with it, and how do I do it? Rob, can you share a little bit about Google and your role there?
Yes, and thank you also for including me today. So I work at Google on partnerships, really focused on business communications, specifically on business messaging. So we recognize that lots of customer care, customer support, user journeys involve Google. You want to contact a business, maybe you go to Google to find a phone number, to find the website, to chat or engage with the business somehow. And lots of those journeys end up being fairly kind of convoluted. There's some sort of painful journeys there that we recognize, and we're often at the head of those journeys. So we're trying to do things that we can sort of provide to the industry to help smooth out some of those user experiences and help businesses sort of meet consumers where they are. We're all consumers. We've all, to some extent, stopped calling each other up. We tend to send each other messages rather than make phone calls. But when it comes to contacting a business, often we have to find 20 minutes, 30 minutes in our day, block that out, be very focused, make that phone call, try and get our needs met in a medium that's maybe not natural to the way that we live our lives anymore. So Google's trying to provide some options there, open up some messaging channels so that we can give businesses the tools to meet consumers in an asynchronous sort of messaging world, and engage them in a far more natural, relaxed, and sort of higher CSAT world than other channels. So very focused on that sort of toolkit. It's early sort of building requirements and bringing those things to our partners so that businesses can engage customers in a better way.
Fantastic, Rob. Thank you so much. Margaret, would you like to share a little bit about yourself at MasterCard?
Sure, thanks, Diane. I really appreciate it. And good morning to everyone. Thanks so much for having me here. My name is Margaret Shine. I'm the Senior Vice President of the Customer Experience Team, Intelligence and Experience Team within MasterCard's Global Customer Care Division. Our Global Customer Care organization is basically built up of both a B2B as well as a B2C customer support teams. I actually sit next to those teams, and my role is looking at those interactions and understanding from a both an operational as well as an experiential type of data coming off of those systems, how to really evaluate what's happening with the customer, where are those pain points, where are there opportunities from an improvement perspective, both in terms of how we look at our servicing capabilities, but also how we look at our business processes and our business and products. I've actually, while I'm relatively new into this role, within a year or so, my history with MasterCard has been deeply rooted in both the sales side, working on the sales side of the organization, as well as our consulting organization, our professional services arm of MasterCard. So this idea of understanding the customer, understanding their pain points, and through the use of data and analytics, evaluating what's happening with them and driving towards actionability, insight to action types of approaches is really what I'm very much focused on with the team that I have on both the B2B and the B2C side. The talk that I'll be doing at the event will be focused very much on that transition, if you will, looking at customer care organizations that have traditionally very much been an evaluation of your cost center, to how do you mine the insights, right? Mine the data in a fashion that you can make your organization smarter about what your customers are saying and bringing that back into the teams, so that you're not just looking at it as cost of servicing, but the value attached to understanding your customers better and bringing that back into the products that you're building and the way in which you're looking at the overall experience from a customer perspective. So I look forward to hopefully speaking and meeting many of you as we get to that event and talk a little bit more about that stuff.
That's great. And if you all haven't really heard it, you can really hear the theme here of using the information to drive that actionability and how to work within the organization to do that, to really use that information, that really rich data and information is used. Okay, we are going to do a little bit, if you look at the quick poll, it looks like there's definitely some focus on track 1 and 2, but overall, people are looking at really this whole holistic strategy, really having to focus on both. So no surprise, one or the other, when we think about what we need to do internally impacts the experience, that strategy and trend is really important. So good to know where your focus is. We're going to talk about both of those, and you'll see how the two pieces actually fit together, much like a puzzle. So we're going to start with track 1 and focus on internal customer experience centric team strategy. Well, what does that mean exactly? We're going to look at the team structures, workforce optimization, and that closed loop feedback you've heard so far, and how these great practitioners are meeting new customer demands. So let's talk a little bit about in the area, if we think about it, where you're really having challenges. Once we've answered some of these questions, you'll be able to send a link so that you can easily follow the conversation. So we're going to start with the data and talk about closing the loop feedback. Michelle, you've talked a little bit about this already. Can you kind of talk about your current proactive and predictive analytics strategy? Like, how did you plan it out? What are the things, like how did you do that? And share what's been the biggest barrier to success. So on both ends of that, what did you plan to go do, and then what did you run into? And what do you think people might be challenged with in this area? So can you start us off?
Absolutely. So this is a really big focus for us this year, especially in our world of escalation. So we're building out our strategy now about how do we really shift from a reactive space of escalations to being more proactive and predictive through advanced and predictive analytics and things like tools and technology. So as I build out the strategy, we're really anchoring around 4 key pillars, which is our culture, empowering our customers to self-serve, insights and predictive analytics, and tools and technology. And I would say that, there's a lot of barriers to success. We are a big company. It's a big culture to shift. It can be very siloed. There's a lot of disparate tools, some of the old culture with wrong measurements, and a lot of lack of 360 customer views. So, and then things as simple as aligning taxonomy. So we really have kind of a single source of data for, a single source of truth. But I think in my space, when I think about it, the biggest barrier is confusing the depth of customer pain with the business impact. So with escalations, it's such a small percentage of the amount of support calls that come through at Microsoft. And so, yes, there's huge opportunity to help one customer at a time, but it's often hard to demonstrate the business bottom line ROI and sell a convincing pitch for why it's worth it to go and resolve these issues. But then we look at things like word of mouth, right? And all these social media platforms, and in our digital age, it has a long way to go to show impact of, a quote, good experience, but it's getting convincingly more and more tangible. So we want to find a way to measure that it's truly worth the investment to rescue these customers. And the business wants numbers, but there's no real formula to measure a lost customer. It's the whole optics and empathy versus bottom line. In terms of closing the feedback loop, we want to get to a place where we're predicting that pain point and preempting it with the customer, because that really shows that we've internalized and understood the impact of the issues without having to have it explained to us. And that truly is really our effort to gain trust as a brand with each and every customer. So a lot of our proactive efforts is really making sure there's trust in the Microsoft brand and being very aware and on top of emerging issues and demonstrating this to our customers. So essentially, if we haven't caught it, we want to immediately learn from it and make changes for the next time to make sure it's not repeated. So our close feedback loop really helps ensure this. And finally, there, a big problem that we bump up against is big data. Big data is big. There are huge business-wide coordination efforts that really need to happen to harness the full power of our data. It's feasible, but it really is a lot of effort. And so collaborating and communicating with all of our critical stakeholders are key. Otherwise, there's just missed opportunities. So when I think about what are leaders doing wrong in this area, we just really need a top-down help to set up our data efforts to align with the business objectives. Essentially, you get what you measure. And I think the other part is just being the team that really is seen as a critical partner and illuminating opportunities for areas of improvement. In escalations, we take so many of our learnings and have to go back to frontline support and partner with them to resolve the root cause. So getting a seat at that table to share our learnings and partnering together to fix root cause issues across the customer journey to improve the experience for our customers is critical. And so landing that with our teams is really where we're focused.
Well, that's wonderful to hear, and it's a very common opportunity we hear when you talked about the executives really looking for that ROI. I think that the ability to calculate and tell that business case story is just huge. So it's one of the competencies we'll be talking a lot about at the conference as people get together. It's just a big gap for all of us to kind of nail that down and really talk about the changes we're making and the impact it has on business value. So thanks for that great call out. Margaret, do you want to share a little bit on this topic?
Sure, and you'll probably hear, Michelle did a great job in terms of highlighting what her organization is doing, and you may hear some common themes coming from me as well. So when I came into this role, as I said, about a year ago, there were a good number of capabilities that had already been stood up within the organization, right? So there was a team of people who, we had groups of people that were insight experts and managed voice of the customer, surveying, and the skills and the deployment. We had data scientists that were looking at how to look at the data, how to slice it and dice it and create models. We had data platforms. We had experience design people. We had customer engagement team members who are going out to our customer set and kind of delivering the MasterCard Bible, so to speak. And so I walked into a really nicely fully formed set of capabilities. But what was apparent as I took the helm here, if you will, was that there was a real big challenge, and that was working from a business perspective. We had all of these insights, all of these opportunities that had been identified, but being able to take those back to the business and get them to be actioned against, to be prioritized, was really very difficult. It was a big challenge, and it goes back to just what Michelle was saying in terms of creating that business link, right, and being able to talk about the actionability and the results of that from a business perspective. So we've been taking an approach that is really very much use case driven. The idea being that we want to partner, we want to collaborate with the business, understand what they're looking at trying to do from a performance perspective, and then evaluate what's happening with the customer around those performance pieces so that use case and the business impact are so much more closely aligned. That then allows us to start to formulate what does that ROI look like when you make those changes by taking those, breadcrumbs, if you will, and laying them out one next to the other. We understand what their business challenges are. We can then evaluate what's happening from a customer perspective and the impact that it has based on that specific business challenge, and provide a point of view around what that means if you take action against it from an ROI perspective. And so that's really what we're focused on in terms of our proactive analytical strategy, is ensuring that partnership, ensuring that we understand what the business challenges are, where the opportunities are, what their goals and objectives are, aligning what we do from an analytical perspective to support and to inform those strategies, and then allowing us to also put some numbers around it in terms of what does it mean when you take that actionability. What we've also done is within our experience design team is gotten not just from a, hey, here's what the insight is and here's what you should do, but taking that recommendation to its fullest form that we possibly can. So when you need to take this action, here's a more discrete and descriptive overview of the details that you need to take. So I call it my add water and stir. How do we make it as easy as possible for our business partners to understand what's happening with their customer and make that decision to move? We need to be clear about our insights. They need to be relevant. We need to have a plan that is clear for them, and we need to highlight for them exactly what the impact is when they make those changes. So that's kind of the approach that we're taking.
That's great. Very, very detailed. Lots of great information there. Thanks for that. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit more about how exactly you're collaborating internally. So you've given us some great pieces and parts there, and I think we can kind of move to, obviously you're working with a lot of different stakeholders, and I'm sure it's hard to please everyone. As we all know, like everybody's got their own agenda, and we have to understand those agendas and address them appropriately. Who exactly are you working with, and how are you ensuring that they are invested as you? It's really about this helping them to be more customer-centric and what's in it for them, building those relationships. So Frankie, I'll have you start, if you would, with kind of the corporate silos, and specifically maybe a couple of stakeholders you're challenged with and how you overcame that.
Yeah, sure. So what I will say is that, all of our organizations more than likely have, grown up to make their different mark and to complete different tasks in specific areas, specific silos, because it's, the best way to get things done. But because you're focused on one area to be an expert or a specialist in fixing one piece of something or developing one piece of something, the passing back and forth of visibility to what the customer is going through, what the customer wants, what the customer needs, that becomes cut off as we sort of focus, laser focus in on our piece of the business and our contribution toward this customer experience. So one thing that the Home Depot is doing really well is, as Margaret was talking about, going through this data and understanding when you're getting information from the customer, can you provide a holistic picture, all around the company, so that no matter whether you're in corporate communications or marketing or customer care, any part of the company, that you're able to see what does the customer go through from start to finish, and what kind of pain are they experiencing, so that we can try to go about that and get that fixed. And I wouldn't say, I was lucky. I've been here at the Home Depot for a little over a year now, and I was very lucky that when I came into the organization, our fantastic leadership had already understood something that some companies have struggled with, that I've worked with in the past. Departments have to work together in order to be able to make this happen for customers. So I walked into a fantastic relationship with our marketing department that's in charge of social media, community management, our corporate communications team, very open, very helpful, and willing to work with us on what should things look like for our customers. And what I've experienced is that the more open we can be, the more sharing we can be, that is really the best way that we can go forward. Sometimes I think that one of the challenges that companies can have is we all have, our corporate jargon, our corporate lingo, even internally to our different departments. So taking all of this information that we have available across customer journey and delivering it in a way that other departments can understand it in plain speak, making your information visually digestible is a term that I think a lot of us are using now. It helps us to really kind of understand more what the customer is going through. And that is, I think when we're all speaking about this, when we get down to it, it's really understanding what is the customer going through and how can we resolve that. So walking across the hall, having those handshakes, doing lunches, those things are very important to making sure that you can really know your partners and understand how you can help each other to make it better for the customers.
I love that. I think it's kind of making it more human, and we all know we have a ton of data, but I love your point about making sure that we represent it appropriately and really let that story come through. I think that's why storytelling has become so critical, and just having those touch points every day. I remind people that 95% of this job is change management and how you bring people along for the ride. So great examples. Thank you for that, Frankie. Margaret, do you want to share a little bit about how you've been able to bring people along?
Yeah, and I love, Frankie, what you had said before in terms of having those lunches and making sure that we understand and are speaking with our internal partners. I think that is absolutely the case. Investing in that network and investing in those relationships is critically important. I'll take a slightly different lens on this, just because a lot of what Frankie had just said is probably very similar to some of the comments that I would be making as well. But one of the things that, again, coming into this job, we had worked with a more focused set of internal stakeholders, and so one of the things that I've been very focused on the last several months has been how do we expand that, right? And so we've taken an approach where, this modification of looking at things from a use case perspective and understanding their business and understanding what their pain points were, and then determining how we bring forward the analytics in a fashion that can help inform them, and looking at that, from a product side of the organization is relatively new for us. And so, quite honestly, the way that we've been looking at this has been a lot of networking, a lot of conversations with people that we haven't necessarily had discussions on, telling that narrative around the role that we're playing in terms of the customer experience and the insight that we can provide, getting a better understanding of what their business opportunities are, and getting that commitment, quite honestly, as well, in terms of, we're going to put resources and invest in your business, and we like the same thing for you, right? We're looking for that actionability piece. So enthusiasm has accounted for a lot, but we basically put it within the context of a pilot, going beyond our traditional footprint out to those new areas within MasterCard, leveraging the relationships that we have, understanding what their business challenges are, and then getting that commitment around what and how we do that. We've now working in areas within our acceptance team and within our regional offices that we haven't necessarily ever really talked to, but leveraging those principles that I had just referenced and that process around understanding and the networking piece in terms of building a coalition, if you will, within those different departments to see the value of what we're bringing and how we can bring that forward has really been our focus over the last several months. And the good thing is that we've gotten a lot of strong support in terms of how we're casting it underneath that use case approach. People are getting it. And what we also hope to do is to use these early pilots, if you will, that are beyond our traditional footprint as a way to reflect that back to the organization. Hopefully build a very successful output from that process and be able to talk to the larger MasterCard organization around how we can help and support and enable their success as well.
Wonderful. That is so great. Michelle, you weigh in. Hearing the same themes again.
Yeah, so I have similar, I would highlight some key points that Margaret and Frankie touched on, but, especially like how they say, just really humanizing the customer journey. And it really truly is about storytelling, and the narrative is key. But at Microsoft, it's definitely a work in progress. As our culture shifts to being more and more customer centric, these conversations are increasingly easier to drive. On our end, it's really that partnership with both engineering and services, obviously our support leaders across our support organization, teams like customer success and all the field facing roles. These are really where we try and create that bi-directional partnership and have that ongoing cadence of how we're feeding back insights that we derived and really breaking down the silos. And then also socializing out our plan to our critical stakeholders to get their input into our strategy. It's really that help me, help you. We want to ensure it's a holistic approach, and we want to bring them along the journey. And then actually partnering together to fix root cause issues. So we, even within my small organization, we have a development team and data scientists, all of that. So we can really pilot and test. We're agile. We can try things out, incubate them, see what works, prove things out, and then look at how do we go and partner and scale those things across the business. So it's really kind of hand in hand partnering together along the journey is key.
Fantastic. Those are great examples. I'm very inspirational to see what you're doing and make it part of your day job. That's all really critical to kind of putting the puzzle pieces together. So that really brings us back to the mission of the Customer Service Summit that's coming up. And something I know you're all very passionate about is that really bringing this service aspect to the center of the business, because customer service used to become what happened after all of the events, and now it is just deeply rooted in everything that folks do and where they need help and support as they continuously go through the journey of even as a prospect coming through. As we reinvent customer support to meet those changing needs, how do you think we can work together as a community to provide customer care that's integral to driving organization-wide strategy? So you've all talked a little bit about this so far, but really talk about the in-depth change that's happened in your organization and the viewpoint that they have of what the customer is doing and how you're helping to achieve that. So really kind of toot your horn a little bit. Rob, I'm going to have you talk a little bit, introduce yourself, and then talk a little bit about what you've done.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
And just to sort of reiterate again, my role is very sort of external facing at Google. So I work with lots of customer service platforms, lots of businesses that are using the tools that we're providing. So I have, I can't speak to the internal ways that Google is providing support, but I do have a sort of maybe interesting sort of oversight in how other people are doing things and where they are on those sort of development journeys and how we're trying to help. I think really sort of, and what Michelle said earlier about you get what you measure, I think really resonates with me and maybe how we're approaching this. So I think a key to this is focusing on the user. Like one of the things that we're building into all of our tools is sort of inherent measure of CSAT or NPS or some other sort of metric that really sort of drives evaluating kind of how satisfied customers are with that sort of engagement, and then sort of being able to sort of deliver that back in a very easy way to the business. And I think that that really sort of helps. How does that help sort of elevate those the focus on the user? The other thing that I think is maybe key in this world is when we're in a sort of asynchronous messaging channel, things can't be siloed. Like you have one conversation. If this is a messaging flow with the Home Depot, there isn't a sort of a different phone number for sales and a different phone number for support. It's one conversation with the brand, and therefore the topics in that conversation can become manifold. But the great advantage of asynchronous and messaging is you can have many listeners to that conversation. You know, that conversation can start off as a prospect, and that can be treated as a sales customer, but it continues. It's not like a phone call where the conversation ends. It's asynchronous, and maybe an hour later or 2 weeks later or 2 months later, that's an existing customer, and they've now got some support issues, and that's the same conversation in the customer's mind. There are just different functions in the business that may participate in engaging them and responding to them. So I think that's a real challenge for businesses, and I think you see some people that you know, are early in that journey and are maybe still in a very synchronous world with very sort of siloed support teams, and then other people that have become maybe more fluid and are working there. And we're doing what we can to help. You know, I think there's a lot of you know, the big data problem. You know, there's lots of content there around those conversations, and that's another area where Google has some strengths. We can help with tools to analyze that massive data, the minutiae of those conversations, to understand intent. What is the customer looking for? How happy are they? How frustrated are they? How do we marry them with the best sort of content or the best team or individual to sort of provide that support? So I think there's a blend there, but how do we sort of take that channel? How do we sort of enforce a high sort of focus on satisfaction, and then how do we use intelligence to bring those various sort of components into that asynchronous mode?
Great, Rob. Nick, that I wanted you to kind of give that perspective of seeing it from that partner perspective. You have a very unique position to kind of see the global and how partners are bringing into that and how the organization absorbs that. So Margaret, Michelle, and Frankie, I'm going to ask you each to give like one quick example of something that you've done to kind of completely reinvent this piece of really bringing that service to the center. Can you give an example of that? Margaret, let's start with you.
So I have one example here. I'm not sure that it is completely reinventing it when you think about it, but it is reinventing it from a MasterCard perspective. So Rob, you mentioned the one conversation with the brand and the siloed support teams. I think that I know that I can absolutely identify with that. There's lots of areas within MasterCard that touch the customer. Lance Gruner, who manages the customer care organization here, has the run phase. We've got people like Donald Chestnut, who's got build and create, and all of the sales team and that type of thing. And so one of the things that we're very focused on is how do we bring that together from a governance perspective. And so what I'm also responsible for is helping the organization, collaborating with those other key stakeholders within MasterCard who are also looking at the customer experience pieces and have a rather critical role. How do we bring them together to make sure that there is more of a unified voice, regardless of what the actual organizational structure looks like? So again, not necessarily revolutionary, but it is absolutely critical in terms of looking at how is that governance reaching across the organization and pulling things together. And that's a key area that I'm focused on as well.
Wonderful. Okay, that's a great example. Michelle, how about you?
I would say, I don't know that it's revolutionary, but for me and for our team, it's really getting out there internally and flipping the script on how support is seen. You know, it really is a key differentiator. And so how do we get our teams brought into that and seeing that so we can go at things together in a holistic way, and looking at how do we get other people invested and involved. So we've created programs that empower our employees to go out and help in real-time scenarios to help customers in need and go out and recover customers. So how do we really infuse that thinking across all of Microsoft and really move the needle on truly being a customer-centric company. That's really been the areas that we lean in the most.
That's really great, because that mind shift is so critical. And Frankie.
Well, I would say that one of our core values here at the Home Depot is providing excellent customer service. So it is ingrained in our culture here to make sure that we are paying attention to the customer. I think one thing that our leadership has been able to do is to deliver, as we go back to talking about reporting, showing what it is that we're able to provide not only to our customers as a service, but what can we provide back to the rest of the organization as fuel. You know, when your product and service people are like, wow, I wonder what the customer wants, I'm going to have to dream it up on my own. Customer service is in a position to be able to say, here's the data that we have, and our customers are saying that they really wish we had X or Y. And I think being able to provide scale behind that really helps the organization understand what is the return on investment on things that we can do. So it's really providing a service back not only to the customers, but to the rest of the organization. And that data is crucial for being able to show in some quantifiable terms what difference the customer service team is making. So I think when that data gets across, it is naturally pulling customer service to the center of the organization.
Yeah, it's interesting for the audience that as you listen to these examples, it really is this dual role of caring for the people internally and getting that mind and behavior shift, as well as caring for the customer. So it makes complete sense, and because it's one of the critical topics of conversation for the summit on how we're going to move forward. So now that we've ironed out a little bit of the creases in the internal strategy, we've created a foundation to meet new customer demands, and that brings us to this track 2, external customer-facing strategy. So we talked about internal, let's face it outward. How can we thrive in the age of exceptional experiences and develop an innovative 2020 strategy that's going to surpass the competition? So let's take another poll right quick. If you look at your screen, what's the biggest challenge in external customer-facing strategy? Is it keeping up with customer demands? Is it this omni-channel and new digital channels that are coming along, seems like every day? Or is it personalization? So once you've entered that, we'll send you a link to the internal track 2 agenda, external track 2 agenda, so you can easily follow the conversation. So take just a few minutes to look at the poll and respond. And we'll come back and talk about your poll, and the next questions we have for the panelists will also address it. For our speakers, when you look at the external piece, how have customer demands changed in the last few years? How has your strategy changed to meet those needs and demands? So Rob, you talked briefly as we were preparing for this webinar about personalization and machine learning. Can you share a little bit with the audience about what you've done?
Yeah, I think Google has a range of different set of products there, but I think clearly there are other things in the marketplace. But I think particularly in and again, it's sort of this lends itself to asynchronous communication and maybe to text rather than to voice, although it applies to both. But the ability to analyze the flow of conversation, the messages, the whole sort of holistic conversation with a user, and understand sort of user intent and be able to sort of surface that back to the user, so sort of being able to sort of analyze knowledge bases, providing kind of quick instant answers to people, be able to provide clickable links in a message flow. So rather than sort of having a sort of long IVR readout, but be able to sort of pre-populate based on user intent, the 2 or 3 things that might be relevant next, to allow the users to sort of quickly tap through those things in a visual and sort of seamless way, is a much more natural, much more sort of quick, spontaneous way of providing that information to the user. So you're using that intelligence to do the analysis to create a sort of unique user journey for that particular individual and get them to the things that they want quickest, which, and a lot of our research has shown that speed is very sort of highly correlated with user satisfaction. Be able to get people to the information or the department or the person or the solution quickest is important to them. And also, we're able to use that same analysis in an agent assist mode. So how do we provide that intelligence back to live agents to give them quick access to data to sort of pre-populate some suggested replies so that they can pick one of those things, provide it back to the user with their own sort of human intelligence and knowledge overlaid on top of that, or be able to edit those things, again, to make their lives easier, to remove the urgency, to remove the stress, and to allow them to provide more intelligence back to the user. And I think that sort of, some of those things can be done very well. Some of those things can be quite awkward. And I think, everybody's somewhere along that journey. I don't think we're working with anybody that has a completely automated solution and 100% of user intent can be contained in some sort of automated or sort of bot mode. But I think having 20, 30, 40% of intents and conversations contained that way is certainly sort of realistic, and often we see those things driving very high customer satisfaction. Being able to provide those things quickly is key to users, and I think that's that whole area is going to continue to expand. The intelligence, the toolkit based around those intelligence to allow businesses to manifest itself to users will just become better, become more sophisticated. And we really believe in that combination of automation plus live agents. Being able to sort of roll asynchronously between the two is a great user experience.
Wonderful, wonderful. And you know what? We just got the poll results back, and personalization, as you were talking about that audience of one, I love to call it, personalization was definitely there, but also making sure that shows up in the same way across those channels. You can see by the poll that not only keeping up with demands, but making sure that you're targeting how that experience shows up for them individually, all the way across the journey, and consistency, which goes back to our whole conversation at the beginning about how you bring people along and break down those silos and get people engaged. So great. I think that lands us on this new digital channel roundtable that Rob, Frankie, and myself will be hosting on the morning of day 2 at the summit. You can check that out on the online agenda that we've been sending you. But let's dive a little bit further into those individual channels. What is, Frankie, I'll start with you. What's the biggest mistake leaders make in bringing in these new channels? And what small changes can they make to reduce pain points? So what do they do to bring it in? How do you address a new channel? And what are the things that you look for in changing that to reduce issues customer might have?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. There are so many new places to be. If we think about an old style use case, we had, if you think even back to the 70s, the 80s, people were standing connected to their kitchen wall by a telephone, and they've called either using the yellow pages or their bill. And in that channel, knowing what the customer needs is to get off the phone as soon as possible. So we have handle time being something, let's try to solve as soon as possible. But because it was so hard to get to an associate through old IVRs back in the 80s and the 90s, people wouldn't let you off the phone. Customers wanted you to solve right there. So first contact resolution became very important. If we change today, I think one of the things that is scary to leaders is I have this entire structure for a call center. How in the world am I supposed to have a separate call structure to be able to handle now a chat center, a social media center, all these other different things? We're copying and pasting. How can I ever do this? It's going to cost a fortune. And I think that people are really aware by now that they need to figure out for their company, where should they be? And that's all about knowing your customer and knowing your product, right? Not all companies, whether you're B2C, B2B, whatever your offering is, your customers are different. Your customers may or may not be on Instagram, right? If you're a bank, for example, maybe you don't need to be on Instagram, or maybe you do. Maybe you've got young, fresh, whatever that is, but understanding where to be when, not trying to boil the ocean all at the same time. It's okay to go out and do one thing, do it really well, and then move on. The second thing, if we go back to understanding customer journey, if you know your product and you know your customer, you can anticipate and provide that touch for them. I know that one time I called a credit card company, and I had just been online or something, and they said, "We noticed that you normally transact your business online. Do you need to speak to a representative?" And I was scared to answer the question and I said, "Yes." And I got to a representative. So understanding, oh, this customer normally transacts business online, something must be wrong. Knowing your customer and then knowing which way to go and how to help them. I think that the main mistake that people make is not understanding what the customer's journey is, not understanding how they will use that channel, and being afraid that they have to have a different department for every different channel. You don't have to do that. You can, figure out how to make it work better for your company.
That's wonderful. Great examples, Frankie. Thank you for that. You're really in touch and in tune with how people are responding, even in new channels, and transversing those channels as well. I love how you brought that up too. Michelle, you gave some great examples as we were preparing for this about self-service. Can you share a little bit with the audience about some of the things in the roundtable discussions we're going to be talking about as it relates to self-service?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with self-service is for people to start investing more here. I think the biggest piece that we find is really creating frictionless and seamless experiences. Customers really expect easy and seamless, and we really have a ways to go to ensure that it's easy for them to switch from modality to modality and getting better about that. So making it easy and intuitive on any device, and really when and where customers need support and when they want to have that support. So at Microsoft, we're trying to get better about having that similar experience across all channels, as Frankie mentioned, no matter what part of the company you're dealing with, and making it an expected experience across those, but really investing there to make it as frictionless as possible. And that's, I think, where as we look more and dig in and click down on the customer journey and see the various pain points, it's getting better about being better about where we know our customers are and how they want to use us in a self-service way, and then investing there to make it a better experience.
Wonderful. Awesome example. Hey, audience, get ready. I'm going to ask Margaret the same question, but get ready with your questions. We're going to be taking questions up until the end of the webinar, so get ready to put those in and go ahead in the chat and do that. So Margaret, same question for you. What about those new channels? Must be a real challenge for the organization.
Yeah. So I think that Michelle and Frankie have done a great job in terms of highlighting some of the thoughts around where there might be some opportunities in terms of the potential mistakes that people make. I guess what I would do is basically highlight two things. First, and I think Frankie, you may have mentioned this, this idea of more channels, right? More is not necessarily more. That Instagram is one, right? It really is about looking at it from a relevancy based on who your audience is, and ensuring that is foremost in front of it. And I think there's also another piece here, which is the nature of the interaction. Does the complexity or the simplicity of what that customer interaction needs to look like how is that supported by the channel? So both how does the channel fit into the overall strategy from a servicing or from an experience perspective, and then how is it intended to support what the customer is looking at doing? Simple to more complex tasks, evaluating that. And so those are probably foundational, but for me, I think that's important to get back to some of those basics to ensure that you're looking at how relevant these channels can be and how they can move forward with your overall customer experience strategy.
Okay, that's wonderful. Good to remind ourselves that it's not just about the channel, but I love that ease and engagement piece that you're after, reminding the organization of the type of experience that we're creating, right? We get so functional sometimes about it, it's hard not to. So good. Okay. Well, audience, this is your chance to really begin to ask some questions of the panel or about the summit coming up and some of the topics. So let's see if we can take some questions. Jasmine? Okay, we have one here about internal. So the question is really about how do you bring the employees along? What are some of the things that you do to bring the employees along, kind of that internal strategy? We talked about the other stakeholders, but we've got a huge workforce that needs to be engaged and involved as well. Michelle, do you want to take that one first?
Yeah, it's something I'm super passionate about. So I can give you an example of something we've done at Microsoft. We started a program that empowers all of our employees to be customer obsessed or customer centric. And we talk a lot about this, and Satya, our new CEO, has really been infusing this in the culture over the last 5-6 years that he's been on board. But a lot of Microsoft employees will think, well, how do I get invested? I'm not in a customer facing role. So we created a program that enabled customers when they're out talking. Oftentimes when you're out in the real world and you tell someone on a plane or at a soccer game for your children that you work at Microsoft, inevitably you can get an earful of a product or service that they're having pain with and experiencing. And we wanted to enable our employees to have something in their toolkit that they could help a customer right then and there. So we have a program where they can connect a customer to white glove support to really rescue that customer and save them. And so they get a call back from someone in support that will help resolve their issue, whether it takes one phone call or 15. And this is just a great way to empower our 140,000 plus employees that we have out in the real world on the streets, speaking and walking that talk that we really are trying to foster across our culture of everyone being a fan and a brand ambassador of Microsoft and going out there and really moving the needle on how the rest of the industry sees us. We've seen great success from the program. We try and go on day one of people's first day at Microsoft to tell them and drive awareness about this program that they have access to. And then we derive a lot of learnings and use it as an additional voice of customer listening channel where we're getting a lot of feedback on areas where we can go and drive improvements. So that's been something that's been really successful for us, and looking at different ways like that to infuse that culture.
Great. I love that. We get several questions that have come in. We only have time for one or two, so Jasmine will talk about how to address these questions later. But one is from Anthony, and he says, it seems to be that we're focused on customer retention, which feels a little negative space to be working in. What's the key to replacing that with customer experience? And kind of not losing focus on the retention, obviously, but how do we kind of shift that mindset of let's not just focus on retention, how do we really engage folks? Any thoughts on that? Michelle, do you want to weigh in on retention versus care?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point, and I agree with you, especially being obviously sitting in the space of escalation. So much of it, what we do is reactive, and that's the culture shift that we're really trying to move towards, is how do we get more proactive and predictive and really get ahead of things before the customer even has an issue. A lot of this is getting better about our 360-degree view of the customer, but also really truly leveraging predictive algorithms and different technology and tools that we can to get in a more proactive and predictive space and creating good experiences and a good customer journey from the get-go. So it takes time, but it's definitely where we're really leaning in this year on how do we get ahead of it. And less so about retention and having it be a positive experience from the very start of their customer journey.
Well, we're running out of time. It's been a very rich, engaging conversation. So I am going to turn it back over to Jasmine, and she'll talk a little bit about the wrap-up and preparing for our meeting coming up.
Thank you so much, Diane, and thank you to our audience for joining this conversation. We really covered a lot in an hour, but some excellent key takeaways, those simple pieces that the audience really can just take back to their team and make a big difference in their ability to deliver the ultimate customer experience. And thank you, Frankie, Rob, Michelle, and Margaret for sharing a taste of what's to come at the Customer Service Summit. If you're able to join us in New York on October 23rd and 24th, I'll be sending around some information with the recordings tomorrow morning. If you have any questions in the meantime, please email me. Just reply to that email, or you can email me on jasmine@insight-group.com. And thanks again to all involved. We really hope to see you all in New York. Thank you.